We're going a little bit off script with this one, but I do have some notes, so I'll be referencing those as we go. But I grew up like I always wanted to be seen as the guy, right? I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with and deal with because they want to be the guy, but maybe they grow up in certain situations where that was never exactly promoted, or every time, somebody tried to step up, or, maybe you tried to step up and be more, take on more of a role, or at least that thing that you really wanted to do. You wanted to be respected, you wanted to be heard, and people just kind of shut it down. And so, I'm not any different than you in that regard. I've always wanted, there's always been something like in me that has wanted to be seen as like the leader or the respectable figure that people look up to. And I think at the end of the day, like I think most people would like to be admired for something. And, you know, I think that one of the biggest issues that we deal with is we have like high expectations for ourselves. And at some point within the last like 3 years, because over these last about 3 to 4 years, I really feel like I'm starting to hit my stride after struggling for so long trying to figure out what the hell to do, overthinking everything, constant states of anxiety, depression, and not really knowing what the hell like my direction is. I feel like we set these massive expectations of ourselves, like we're supposed to be this great thing. But something I've learned is there's a big difference between having high expectations versus having high standards for yourself. And there is a very distinct difference between the two, where expectations are future based, right? And standards are present based. And we know if we've done any sort of self improvement like research, like you'll know that most people or gurus or whatever are going to sit there and tell you, like, you have to live in the present, right? And that's true because we can't control anything outside of us, outside of this moment. So we can't control the future results. We can't manipulate them. We can only do the best that we can with what we have right now. And so part of the something I've learned was like there's a difference between having a standard versus having an expectation. And as I've started to shift more towards having a standard and being able to just give something everything I have with the best that I have available to me, while constantly remembering I need to learn new stuff, it's really paid dividends up to this point in my life. And so in this video, I really want to go through a lot of the struggles that I've had in terms of like all the way back from elementary school, as I've noticed how my development has been and how long that a lot of those early experiences have fucked with me, and how I've, learned to work through them, and specifically the lessons that I've taken away that have like dramatically shifted like my entire trajectory and how where I feel like I'm going. Because I'm not saying like if I would have learned this sooner, I would be much further ahead, because truth be told, I don't know that, but I do know I would have been where I am now a hell of a lot faster if I would have learned these things earlier. So, like now, like I'm in a space where I feel like I'm about to like go off, right? And I feel like there's most people have at least had moments in their life where this has been the case. And I think it really comes down to a couple of very subtle but really key mindset shifts and perspectives that you have to have in order to really hit your own zone. And fortunately, like a lot of people that are the like the top athletes that we look up to, or just the top performers in general in any field, like a lot of them have that stuff naturally and they pick those things up naturally. Or maybe they've never even had to work for it because it's just innate or it's genetic within them. And that's a very small subset of the population. So I'm no different than you in terms of like I've had to develop myself, my confidence, my charisma, and everything in order to get to where I am now. And, thinking back on everything, it really does come down to your ability to have confidence in yourself to figure things out. And it's kind of like, we get fed a lot of advice too from like people that make a lot of money, or CEOs or whatever, that are telling us now, oh, just chill out, take it easy, work smarter, not harder. But then they're discounting the fact that what got them to where they are is through an absolute fucking grind. And that's what I'm like, I have problems with in self improvement, is a lot of people that are feeding you the self improvement advice is just stuff they wish they had known, which is valuable, but it's not what they actually did. and it's painted through this rose-colored lens, and I think that that just kinda needs to stop. I think people need to be more real about like, "Hey, this is what I actually had to do to get here, and it sucked. I would have done things differently, but at the end of the day, with what I knew at that point, like, that's just the best that I had," and I think that's what a lot of people do because it's super easy to look back and think, "If only I knew then what I know now." But truth is, like, we only know now what we know now, so we have to do the best that we can. And so a lot of my struggles started off with, this confidence issue and wanting to be the guy but not being respected way back in elementary school. So, like, I know that a lot of people, at least if, in elementary at recess, like there's always friend groups, right? Like two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight people, right? Eight kids all kind of running around. And typically, even these groups of kids, like there is a hierarchy of things. There's an alpha, there's a ringleader, and then you have a second in command, a first mate, and then just on down the ladder. And one of my best friends was always the alpha. And I was always kind of the second mate. And even though it was a decent childhood, like, in terms of my confidence, like, nobody ever takes the second in command that seriously. So even when homeboy was sick and, like, out and whatever, like, nobody ever took what I had to say, like, commands or whatever game we were playing, like, I still didn't ever really have any say. And so this development, like, kinda led into my athletics career where I was always a decently athletic kid. But once again, I was never the guy. And so I always had these issues with like my confidence because I knew I worked harder than most people, at least at practice. And I will be getting to this later because that's a shift that I had later on. But like growing up through sports, like through like elementary and middle school, like I was always halfway decent. Like in football, I played quarterback. I played every position there was imaginable in baseball. And like I played basketball. And I was always more of like that six man, like that role player. I was never the star, and the frustrating thing was I really wanted to be a leader because I knew I had things to say and, like, insights to give people, but when you're that age and that immature, most people just look at raw results, and that's even the case today. Most people just look at raw results and don't really think about what's being said, and because of that, like, nobody ever respected me. In basketball, dude, I was lucky to get, like, 6 points, but part of that confidence also came from the fact that I was afraid to take my shots. Right, because I was so scared of screwing up that people would then no longer look at me for any sort of, like, respect or anything, that I would have rather have just given the ball off and let somebody else screw up, but at the same time, I also never got any sort of glory, and so, that kinda followed me up through junior high, and of course, you hit, 13, 14 years old, that's when most men hit puberty, right, and start developing. Well, I never hit it then. In fact, I didn't hit it till I was like till like 16, 17. So then all of a sudden there's a whole other issue to deal with where everybody else like is their bodies are just developing, they're getting even more athletic. Whereas I'm stuck here as a 5 foot, nothing like literally 5 feet tall. I'm eighth grader, freshman in high school, just getting mollywopped at football practice. I wasn't quarterback anymore because I was too short to see over the line, so I get moved to corner to defensive back, which is where all the small kids go, or the kids that just aren't as good. And it's like it's not that I had good body awareness. I had certain like good skills, but I wasn't athletic. And of course, when you're playing athletics, it pays to be really athletic. And so, I didn't ever get a whole lot of respect from other people in terms of sports. And I was also because I was so small, like people could pick on me. It didn't matter if I fought back. Like they were still going to because even if I did fight back, they know they could kick my ass anyway, and I knew they could kick my ass. And you know, I had a real big struggle with it for a long time, and like a lot of my confidence just went to shit. And my dad told me at one point, like he always felt bad because like he just kept telling me to like just keep working hard. I was starting to wonder, like, am I ever even gonna grow? Am I ever even gonna be worth the shit? And so I finally hit puberty through high school, and of course in athletics, and like I start being very athletic, right? And I start like, smaller colleges, not nothing big. I wasn't like a Division 1 athlete or anything. But they start looking at me and I start to develop, and I'm getting strong as hell in the weight room as far as for football goes. I go from 130 pounds to like 180 pounds, pretty lean, probably like 11% body fat, like very pretty athletic, had a I think at the time, like over a 29-inch vertical. Like I had some skill sets, and like even in baseball, I was all conference, all district. Like, if you know anything about baseball, like my junior and senior year combined, I had hit for over a 425 batting average, led the team or was second in the team in hits and everything, and was one of the best efficient defensive players. But we still had guys on our team going D1 that were a little bit more selfish, but they were also a little bit more outspoken, and they were just better overall for the sport than I was. And I just kept getting frustrated. And that went on through my junior college. And, as I get in, I finally go off to a 4-year school, NAIA, play there. And I remember specifically my junior year, our conditioning, right? I came in, I thought I was in shape, and I was very, very out of shape. And I shouldn't say very out of shape, but I was out of shape. And it kicked my ass. I felt like ass. I looked like ass. But I do remember, and I had this moment where I was like, I never want to feel like this again. I always want to be prepared. And this was also during a time where I was struggling to figure out, like, how everybody will tell you that you have, like, everybody's got that one thing that they're like naturally have a natural proclivity towards. And I didn't know what the hell it was, and so I was just kinda like, "Fuck it." Like, if I'm going to not be the guy in terms of on the field, like, being the most talented guy, then I'm at least gonna be the strongest and the best in shape on the team. And so I remember, especially after my junior year, that summer, like, I busted my ass, and, I mean, I was training twice a day, every single day, or twice a day, 5 days a week, from conditioning in the morning to lifting in the evening. And then I come back my senior year, and I remember specifically, like, I dusted everyone in our morning early AM conditioning. And I mean, it was funny because it wasn't nearly as hard. Everybody else is on the ground. I'm still standing up, like ready to go back for more. And I remember that was the moment because my coach had said something about it to me, and that was the moment where I started to internalize this idea of just because you have a natural proclivity towards something does not mean that you're going to want to do the thing, right? So I would always work hard in practice, but I wouldn't really be that consistent or work hard outside of practice just because I was kind of lazy. I didn't really want to. And it dawned on me after I'd went through that whole experience where I was like, dude, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you're going to want to do it all the time. And I think that's what a lot of people hold up is they assume that something they're good at, they're just going to want to automatically do. And what I realized that I'm good at is than a lot of people, I can tolerate a ton of pain. Like through my powerlifting, even like just in workouts, like I can just endure a ton of pain and suffering. And I've always been able to do that. Even whenever I was like it hadn't hit puberty yet and was coming in middle to last in all the sprints, like I could still outlast people. And so it really got me thinking about how like my natural gift of being able to just tolerate a high level of pain means I might not get there as fast as other people, but I will get there if you give me enough time. And I think that was a super important lesson because that's reflected into my sales now where, I can comfortably say like I feel confident that I can make over six figures. I can go to any company and make over six figures because I'm that confident in my sales abilities now. Like, and that's just because through years I've just grinded. I used to hate cold calling. I still hate cold calling, but I'm not bad at it. At least I'm willing to just do enough, like a ton until I get to the result that I want. And what all that starts to teach me is like, you don't build confidence. You don't just have confidence. You build it through experience and slow incremental notches up on the ladder of that confidence happens. So it's always like you're just built like confidence is something, it's not one thing. There's like layers to it. And you have to prove to yourself multiple times that you're at least willing to try something before you start getting confident in your ability to actually get results from that thing. And I also use like these YouTube videos. Like the more I do these, I don't think I'm necessarily great at it. I know I say a lot of ums and like little things that I need to work on. I know I'm not the most concise all the time, but every time I do this, I get better at it and I get more comfortable at talking into the camera here. And I think most people just need to have an understanding that like confidence is just something that you build through trial and error and you just try a bunch of stuff. And eventually the idea of just like people talking shit or haters or whatever you want to call it, like you just kind of ignore it because there's always going to be something that somebody has to be nitpicky about. And so, like, going off, feeling yourself, getting in your groove, getting in your zone, leveling up, whatever the hell you want to call it, it's not about being like performing and getting results all the time. It's about performing and trying to do so regardless of the results that you actually get. And when you start getting into like a flow with life, a flow with the direction that you're going, that's when things start to change. You start to see things differently. You start to not really care about failing as much because you know if you just keep doing something, like you have to eventually get better at it, at least if you're putting some form of intention into it. And I mean, you just have to be willing to shoot shots. Whether it's dating, I remember whenever I sucked at dating, like you just have to ask girls out. You just got to go on dates, figure out, screw up while you're on them, embarrass yourself, have somebody ghost you multiple times, and really try to narrow down like what could you have done better. And that's really been one of the biggest lessons is that like if you can just get okay with not being okay in terms of like feeling like you're just not all the way there yet, you're going to make it because you're willing to suffer a little bit. And not many people nowadays are willing to suffer as much. And you're going to look like an idiot doing whatever you're doing. You're not going to get the optimal results, which I think looking for optimal can be a good thing, but not at the expense of if that keeps you from doing what you need to do to consistently move forward. Because throughout all of this, as I have up leveled myself, as I've up leveled my skills in sales, I've noticed just through the sheer conviction and confidence that I have, people actually start to ask me things more in terms of like, what should they do? They ask for more advice on things. And I think it's coming like when you can come off as somebody that you may not have all the answers, but you have the answers based on what you currently know. People know that, and people can sense that, and people can sense the genuineness behind what you're saying. And they're no longer scared to ask you because they're also not intimidated. Because I feel like a lot of people also don't ask people things because they're scared of like feeling like a burden to somebody else. I know that was me. Or they just maybe they think that that person is like way up here like a god and they're just way down here. That's how I felt about myself for a long time. But with that being said, back to, doing the shit that you need to do and doing things that you don't really want to do, putting effort behind something is valuable. But I think where people get caught up in the whole like, I'm working so hard, but I'm not getting anything in return is because people don't realize that that effort always goes unnoticed until the result happens. Because I guarantee you there is a YouTuber out there, a kid out there, whatever, that is just grinding away, posting videos, working their butt off to be a better athlete, whatever it is that nobody has noticed yet. And they might be doing it for years. But whenever they finally pop off, that's when people are going to go back and be like, oh, see how much effort he put in? That's when the respect happens. And it all starts with your ability to respect yourself enough to also understand like there's a difference to back to what I said about having a standard versus having an expectation. Expectations will set you up for a lot of misery. Standards are going to set you up for a lot of happiness and fulfillment and success because whenever you have a standard and you follow it, your opinion of yourself and your internal worldview is matching up with the external because you're doing the thing. But when you have an expectation, your internal worldview and the outer doesn't match up. And that's just because the standards we can control right now, the expectations that we can't. And so I hope that what you can take away from this is like, if you've never felt like you're worth much, or you've never felt like you have the ability to be somebody that somebody else looks up to, your time is coming. You just have to keep putting in the work because eventually you'll get results and then people will recognize your effort and then people will start to respect you and look up to you in that way. So, I hope if you, take anything away from this, it's just put your head down, but do it in a way where you know you will get there, but it's going to suck for a little bit. But other than that, if you have anything else, leave questions in the comment section. Always happy to help in any way I can. But until next time,